Alright guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about influences on Congress and how they vote. Alright, so there are a lot of different groups that influence Congress and put pressure on their decision making, including political parties, their constituents, their colleagues in Congress, as well as the president, interest groups, lobbyists, PACs. So we're going to look at some of the specific ways that each of these groups influence congressional decision making. All right, so the first one we're going to deal with is with political parties, and we have a term here, party polarization. This refers to the increasing ideological division between Republicans and Democrats. So it's not just the fact that Republicans and Democrats are different and have different ideologies, but that gap or the division between them is widening. It's getting larger. So if you look over on the right-hand side, you can see this chart that goes from 82 to 2012. So again, before I get to the chart, we're talking about Democrats becoming more liberal while Republicans are becoming more conservative. So again, they're moving away from each other. If you notice in 1982, there was a lot of overlap between Republicans and Democrats, where you had essentially 344 members, that there was overlap where some of the Democrats were as conservative as Republicans, or Republicans who were as liberal as a good number of Democrats. And you can see as that number gets smaller and smaller to 2012, where there's only 11 that have any overlap really ideologically. The rest of the Democrats are completely removed from the Republicans, and the Republicans are completely removed from the Democrats. So you see very little overlap, both parties moving towards further to the right or further to the left. So why is this happening? So we have two main causes we're going to look at. One is that there have become more clear differences on issues. So major issues politically, things like gun rights, things like abortion rights, things like affirmative action, things like tax cuts or tax increases with more social programs to help the poor and the elderly. There are pretty clear positions that Republicans and Democrats have each staked out. So that's one thing that pushes them in further away from each other. Another is that there are more ideological voters who vote in primary and midterm elections. This is one that we haven't really spoken about primaries yet. So for right now, the idea though is that the people who actually show up and vote in primaries, which is when the parties choose their candidate, they tend to be the most conservative Republicans or the most liberal Democrats. And so if they're the ones that pick their party's candidate, in the general election, when the more moderate voters show up, they really have a choice between a liberal Democrat and a conservative Republican. Whereas they probably would want to choose a centrist from one of the two parties, but they don't have that choice because of the people who vote in the midterms, well, really in the primaries. Midterms is also true, so congressmen are able to be more conservative or more liberal because the people who vote in the midterm elections, again, tend to be those ideological voters. As a result, we have policy gridlock, which is when it's very slow or difficult to get anything done, to get things passed. Fewer bills do actually get passed. There are more filibusters, so again, slowing down action, fewer bills getting passed, again, another way to say that. And tougher confirmation proceedings, so we end up with lots of vacancies on courts and in cabinet positions, not cabinet positions really, but in other bureaucratic positions, ambassador positions, because of this lack of cooperation between the two parties. So this influence of parties manifests itself through party line voting, which is when congressmen vote along party lines. So the Democrats all vote with Democrats, they all vote one way, and the Republicans all vote together on the opposite direction. Whips and party leadership and party caucuses are each responsible for this as they try to maintain party loyalty, and they want to make sure that their members stay with the party. So they as well put pressure on congressmen to vote with the party. Constituents matter also. Congressmen usually vote with public opinion. So about 2/3 of the time, if you remember we talked about the delegate versus trustee model, about 2/3 of the time they do go along with what their constituents want. So constituents' voices do matter at least a decent amount of the time. All right, what about their colleagues? So their fellow congressmen and congresswomen. Well, we have a term called logrolling. Logrolling refers to vote trading. So it's the idea of you vote for mine, I vote for yours. So you have representative in Florida who wants a certain bill passed that's going to benefit her constituents. The representative in Montana doesn't really care about that bill whatsoever, but they'll vote for it because in exchange for the vote of support for the Florida bill, the Florida rep will vote in support of something the Montana representative wants. So we have a lot of vote trading taking place. So in other words, you end up voting for things not that you care about or your constituents care about, but so that you can get stuff done at other times. So there's a lot of this that takes place. The president also matters. He can threaten to veto a bill, and he can use the media to put pressure on Congress. So whether it's social media or whether it's calling press conferences and speaking to traditional media or cable media, the president's able to put a lot of pressure on Congress's agenda. And interest groups, lobbyists, and PACs, again, we haven't talked about them yet formally, but they provide information to lawmakers. They testify in congressional hearings, so about bills that should be made. They also make large campaign contributions, and they can put grassroots pressure. Grassroots referring to the people, so they can actually, the interest groups can go to the people and have the people put pressure on their congressmen. All right, so again, subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget, hit that like button. This has been a La Money production.